this is my first time that I've been talking to you, so I apologize if I ask some questions that you've already talked about in previous interviews. So I love the idea that this show initially came from a personal place, that it was grounded in you dealing with your father's loss and your family dealing with the loss. So I want to start with that. When you pitched that idea, was it always to NBC or was that to other networks and you just ended up with?
No, I think we went to 4 or 5 networks. I know we went to NBC, ABC, Fox, and Netflix for sure. I don't remember beyond those 4. And there were multiple networks that wanted it, but I had a pre-existing relationship with Cara Delaverson and Lisa Katz at NBC, and they came in the most aggressively and were very passionate about it, and it was kind of hard to deny.
Obviously, the first season, very focused on Zoey and her family and dealing with loss. Powerful. I think you got an audience that even people who don't normally like musicals connected with this show. When the show received the buzz that it did, the awards that it did, and everything, was there always a plan for more, or was that something where you were like, oh shit, I have to come up with something now, and I wasn't prepared for it?
I don't think there was never a goal to make it a limited series, you know?
Okay.
It was never constructed in that way. I think I had sold a TV show, I think a year before Zoey's, called Moving On, which was a half-hour show that I sold to CBS about a family a year after the patriarch had passed away, and dealing with the stories of the son becoming a father while losing his father, the mother having to go back into the dating world, and sort of the experiences that had happened in my own life with my family and my sister after my dad had died. So I always thought that there would be an evolution, if Zoey's were so lucky to get more, that eventually, like, that Moving On would become season 2 or season 3 of the show. And so I, again, just trying to always root it in personal and my own experiences. I thought there was a lot of interesting stories, and still are a lot of interesting stories to tell about what grief looks like after the person is gone, and the various ways in which we try to move on, and the complications that go with it, and the long shadow of the loss. So I was always prepared to continue that journey for the family.
I'm also curious, knowing if you actually had any reservations about continuing it, because I hate to say this, but it's just the truth, right? We know this with pretty much any form of media. Once you have something that becomes like a cultural phenomenon, like the first show, the first season, there's always like criticism that comes when you continue it, whether it's a sequel, a second season, or whatever. Did you have any reservations about that? Knowing that people were going to be critical of the second season because of how freaking great the first one was.
I think Mandy Moore and I are the choreographer, producer of the show, who's really my creative partner on the show. I think that we always set very high creative bars for ourselves. And we have very high expectations and pressures that we already put on ourselves, let alone outside expectations. And so I think that, first of all, for me, I've worked so hard for so many years to get a show that had this kind of, whatever we want to call it, but also something that checked all the boxes for me: comedy and drama and musical and emotional and personal, that I was just so grateful for the opportunity to keep it going. So I was not really necessarily thinking about what does it mean and how are we going to top it. I think I felt my own expectations to like want to do a good job and to want to continue to play out these storylines in satisfying ways. And I remember I felt the most pressure towards the love triangle, because I felt like the family stuff, I felt like I knew how to navigate, and work stuff I thought we could make fun, have fun with. But the love triangle was the one that I was the most concerned, especially as I started to see how passionate the Team Max and Team Simon fan bases were.
Oh yeah. And I think that in this second season, my wife will just continue to scream at the screen and just kind of say, no, Rose is bad. I don't want, like it literally was like every time we would watch an episode and someone would come on, no, I don't want Simon. I want, and
your wife is
I kind of like him.
Your wife is Team Max is what you're saying.
Yes. Oh, my wife is 100% Team Max. But I mean, again, she's a Broadway lover. So when he opens his mouth and starts singing, we understand
Sure.
and we understand.
Chorus of angels around him at all times.
Yeah.
But you know what? John Clarence Stewart is no schlepper either. I mean,
No, he's not.
He's impressed. He is deeply impressive and deeply soulful. And every time that John performs, I find it to be electric and kind of magical. There's some work that John did this season that I am really blown away by. I think there's some Emmy-worthy, if I dare say so, work from John.
No, I and that's funny because I want to talk about John for a second because his storyline really gets fleshed out in this season. And I love the fact that you tackled the whole racism within the corporate world and, the tie to Black Lives Matter. What was his involvement with those episodes?
Deeply involved. Again, one of the things that we really try to do on the show is be authentic. And whether that's authentic to my own experience, whether that's authentic to Alex Newell's experience, whether that's authentic to the writers' experiences, I feel like the more specific and real that you can be in tackling these subject matters, the more universal they become and the more truthful they are. And, delving into something as complicated as race was very challenging for us. And I just felt like if we were going to do that in Zoey's, what does that look like on Zoey's, and how do we do it? How do we honor that in a way that feels most true to us and to the show? And so that started very early on with conversations with John, conversations with Alex, conversations with Capeel Talwalkar, who plays Tobin, wanting their input, and certainly a lot of intense conversations in the writer's room. But we had Zora Bikangaga, an African-American writer, write it. We brought in Luther Brown, a Black choreographer, to do it. We had a Black female director, Anya Adams, directing that episode. It was very important to me and to Mandy to step away from our own experience and to allow other voices to help us tell that story in as accurate of a way as possible, authentic as a way as possible. And John was very involved every step of the way in the, we talked to him about it. I think we showed him outlines. He read various versions of scripts, had long conversations with me and Zora. So there was a lot of John's own passion and feelings in there. And John has obviously a lot of thoughts about it.
Yeah. I mean, I thought out of everyone this season, I think he was the standout. Just because, yeah, I mean, you can say that about Mo too, kind of coming to terms and everything, but I feel like Simon's character kind of goes complete circle this season, where you learn about his, we got hints about his past in the first season, and then we got more of it. But the fact that now that he has this whole new journey that's hopefully, fingers crossed, will be explored in season 3, I think that's something worth watching and looking out for. I wanted to ask you something else about juggling storylines. So what I was actually talking to Shannon before we started this conversation, and I was saying, like, with a network television show, it's so much different than like a cable show or a streaming show, because you kind of have to appeal to a very wide demographic. You don't have that liberty of just picking one type of like niche marketplace and going for it. You kind of have to appeal for everyone. So for you personally, what's the biggest struggle of having all these fantastic characters, but making sure that you give them equal screen time and equal representation?
It's very challenging. I mean, we have 42 and a half minutes each week to tell these stories. And we try to have like an A, a B, a C, and a D story sometimes. Occasionally we have an E runner, and that's all in the service of trying to service as many characters as possible and making sure that we're playing out their arcs in a satisfying, serialized way. And inevitably, certain things end up on the cutting room floor just because of time, or that person's storyline that we wanted to service this week, we weren't able to do. And we all feel the loss of that. The actors get disappointed. I feel upset that I wasn't able to honor them the way that I wanted to, or give them something as juicy as I wanted. The show lives in a few different places. It lives at home with the family. It lives in the romantic storylines. It lives in the workplace. It lives in the Mo storylines. that's a lot of stuff to juggle at all times. And you're also juggling various tonalities too, because to me, this whole show is about tone, and it's trying to live in this place between comedy and drama and musical and all that. So making sure that there's something emotional every week, there's comedic stuff each week. It's a lot of things that you have to juggle, and the story breaking is really complicated. And on top of that, the hardest thing that we always have to monitor is what Zoe's arc and what Zoe feeling going through scene to scene to scene. So it's a lot to juggle and tackle, and I don't know if we always get the balance right, but our goal is to try to always service people and make sure that, like, with such a deep bench of talented people, that you're giving them songs and you're giving them moments and you're giving them their due. And I'm sure actors feel frustrated sometimes that they don't have more, but it's not intentional. I want to give everybody as much as I can.
But I think you do a really good job with it. I mean, the season definitely has a lot to kind of build on. You introduce a lot of fascinating ideas in this season, and I think that's why I'm so hopeful for season 3, because there's a lot of storylines that you're kind of like, I want more of this. I want to see more of it. But it's building blocks, and I appreciate it, because like the first season again feels so complete. Like you kind of feel like you can walk away with that, and you're like, okay, that's done. Now you have this next season, which kind of builds upon ideas of loss, but then it builds this world that Zoe lives in and all these characters that she interacts with on a daily basis. So, I mean, just kudos to you on that. So, Peter Gallagher coming back, I think that was the icing on the cake. I mean, really, in that last episode, when they sing together, like, just beautiful, magical. Talk about Peter Gallagher and what makes him so perfect to play that father role.
His deep humanity, his connectivity and his life force, I think, which is real. I mean, it's him offset. He's such a warm, engaging presence. Everyone, like, the room lights up when Peter walks in because he brings that energy with him. And I think also just this love relationship between father and daughter that's been established on the show, and the way that Zoe looks to Mitch as sort of her guidepost, her northern light or northern star, whatever that is. I think that Peter just embodies a lot of the warmth and the spirit of that, and that's effortless. That's not something that is manufactured. So I think I think there's probably audience recognition for him as fathers on other shows and stuff that probably come along with it. People knowing him through his career over the years, that they've probably feel some sort of affinity or closeness to Peter Gallagher, whether they know from what or not, I don't know. But I think there's an instant connection between him. And so I also feel like by choosing someone like that to watch someone that people have known go through that illness is different than if it had maybe been an unknown actor. I think that there's people identify with Peter and want to root for Peter. And so I think that probably helped us in terms of people's connection to the show in the beginning in season 1 and empathizing with that journey.
Just terrific. I mean, I cannot praise you enough for the casting of this show, just in general, because just everyone totally fits the bill. I mean, they did, and everyone. You watch a lot of shows where there's characters, and characters get, like you were talking about earlier, gets kind of sidetracked, right? And you're kind of like, where'd that character go? And you're like, I want more. But you do such a great job of balancing everything and giving everyone their moment in the spotlight.
I kind of just want to record what you're saying and just play it back for myself to help my ego every day when I'm feeling down. This is really very ego boosting. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I again, it's watch so much entertainment. So like when something like this kind of falls in my lap and I watch and I connect with it, I'm kind of like, wow, it's really well done. I think I would be embarrassed if I didn't ask about the music in this season, because obviously it's a driving force for the show. I mean, we could just talk about the last episode, which obviously you raised the freaking bar with it.
Season finale. Got to go big or go home.
Yeah. How does licensing work for these songs? Like, I understand that they're coverers, but like, do you go to Elton John and be like, I'm Still Standing? Like, how does that work?
The process is mostly the same. We have a musical supervisor named Jen Ross, who is awesome. And I will go to her usually very on in the story breaking. This is our shorthand that we've developed over 2 seasons. I have an awareness now of some artists that are very, very hard to get. So sometimes we try to stay away from the artists that we know to be really challenging, either that they'll be too expensive or it'll take too long to get a response or we won't get a response. So there's a small swath of artists that I would love to try to go after in the future that we haven't been able to get yet or go after. But I'll write Jen as we're breaking the story, and I'll be like, I'm still standing Elton John. Can we get it? And she'll be like, and I remember, I think a year and a half ago, when Rocket Man was coming out, Elton John, or whenever that was, like, we needed to put a pause on Elton John for a minute because of Rocket Man. But then she'd write me back and she'd be like, yeah, Elton John, I think we can get that one. Or like some other artist, that one's going to be harder. Or I might need you to write a letter on that person. And so we just have this shorthand, but I'll come to her with the songs most of the time. She'll reach out to the artists or the representation or the usually the music label. And then very quickly, or within a few days or a week after, we'll get the go-ahead that we got the rights, or we might need to do a little bit more to get the rights. But there's only been one song each season that we weren't able to get. And
really? Only one?
In season 1, I had to write letters to multiple artists directly to appeal to them to get their song. When Jen said this, Beastie Boys never clear anything, you're gonna have to write a letter to the Beastie Boys. So like I did that season 1. Season 2, I think I only ended up writing 1 or 2 letters and we got those songs. And then everybody else, I guess, because maybe the show was a little bit more out there, we cleared, we did not have, everybody said yes, except for one song.
Wow, that's great. My favorite song, and I say this knowing that there's a lot of great songs in the show, but my favorite song from season 2 has definitely got to be Starships. Just because that episode in general, when they all get high and they go in the street, it's like that light moment of the show where I'm just kind of like, this is freaking just hilarious.
We got some flack for that. I got some letters and some people felt like this is kind of I didn't realize we were being taboo, but there were some people who felt, this is a family show and we think you're glorifying taking drugs, which was not my intention. My intention was to try to show Zoey being a little bit rebellious and doing something that was out of her comfort zone. And by the end of the episode, she decides this is not for me. And so that was all part of the Zoey journey of the season, which is her journey of grief and recovery. And I went through a bunch of stages with it. They're right there on the board: recovery, relapse, regression, rebirth, and redemption. And one of those things in there was rebellion. And so it made sense that she was trying to rebel as part of her grief and trying to do something different, and it didn't work for her. But some people were angry about that.
Really? I mean, she lives in California. I mean,
listen, there are parts of this, there are people out there that don't want to glamorize or glorify that in any way, which was not my intention. Really, the whole point of that was to be like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to show a Zoality musical number while Zoey was on drugs? That was the entire thought process.
Hey, listen, I was a fan of it. I actually they didn't release that officially, but someone put it on YouTube and I watch it a couple times a week. I'm going to be honest.
Well, I really would like to see you do the choreography at one point then.
Let's go. Yeah. All right. They're telling me that I have one last question. First of all, thank you again for doing this interview. Had a blast.
Of course. Thank you.
We so I guess we need to end with like the cliffhanger. Season 3. What do you want from it if it happens? Well,
we try to set the table at the end of season 2. We try to have some sort of resolutions in the stories, but also set the table for a bunch of things going forward. So obviously the biggest thing is what just happened with Zoey and Max and the powers, and what does that mean as something for season 3? That's a big season 3 cliffhanger idea. But there's also the cliffhanger idea of Maggie going back out into the dating world now and what that could look like. There's now Mo and Perry and kids. And what is it going to be like with Mo having to now be part of this more adult relationship with children? And I'm very excited about the prospect of seeing scenes with Mo and kids and the difficulty of navigating that. Then the big thing with Simon and work and starting this incubator for diverse businesses and what that means to SparkPoint and what that means for Simon's storyline. So hopefully we've set the groundwork, and Tobin and Mackenzie and their dating relationship. So hopefully we've set the groundwork for a lot of different new story threads for season 3. And obviously the biggest among them is what's going on with the powers.
I really do hope that it gets it. I cannot wait to see what happens next. And I could have talked to you for another 20, 30 minutes. So man, I appreciate it.
Anytime you want, I'm here.